Welcome to PI Exchange. I'm Mark Michelson, Editorial Director and Editor-in-Chief of Printing Impressions Magazine. Today I'm honored to have with me Ralph Nappi, who serves as president of both NPES and the Graphic Art Show Company. Welcome, Ralph.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. So I recently attended a GRAPH EXPO 16 pre-exhibitor event down in Orlando, which I want to get into. But before I talk about that, I thought it might be good to talk a little bit about this year's show, GRAPH EXPO 15. Now you've announced some new co-located events with GRAPH EXPO.
Yeah, that's right. We actually are very excited about, for the first time ever, we have a co-located show called Process Expo. That includes the International Dairy Show and the Interbev process shows, which happen to be taking place in the North Hall of McCormick Place during two of our overlap days, which would be Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, this wasn't by plan, or I said semi-plan, in that we recognized that they were going to be there, and we have a pretty good relationship with that organization, and then decided, hey, maybe we should take a look at the opportunity to co-locate or the ability for our attendees to be in both shows without having to register for both events. And obviously, as you know, Mark, from so much that you've written in your publication, and our industry knows that this whole process and packaging part of our industry is a great growth area. So that's the one really exciting thing. And what's good about it too is their show opens up on Tuesday and goes through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we have two of our days, which I think are perfect overlaps, both that Tuesday and Wednesday. And
right.
Bang, it's done, and you get to go in. And it's right across the South Hall, where we're all very familiar with, where our registration has been for so many years. So it's going to be very easy to do both. Okay. You know, the other thing, we have a couple other new things at GRAPH this year, which will be pretty exciting. We have an industrial printing pavilion. And in the past, we've had a future print, which included 3D printing. It's included RFID and other areas, but we've expanded that to be a little bit more than that. So we'll have free sessions in that on the floor, and we're working on it on making that a little bit stronger. You know, we have a partner with that in Flex Tech Alliance. They're also helping with that whole event too. We also have a new what's called Applications Island, which will be taking place at GRAPH EXPO in Chicago in September of this year. The International Sign Association is working with us on that neat event, so we're very pleased with that. And what's also, we go over to one other aspect. For those of you that have been to the Education Main Street, which is where a lot of universities, we provide an area to let universities that have graphic communications programs display some information about them. We have a new area which is basically a Skills USA booth. Skills, which is an annual competition, almost an Olympics, of over 90 VOTEC areas, but graphic communications happens to be one of them. And the number of organizations that have been very supportive of Skills USA have gotten together and created a small little booth which shows a little bit about what the competition is about, and also the organizations that support it, which are very important.
Okay, let's move on to GRAPH EXPO 16, because obviously that's a big change. You know, right. The show's been, what, for 20 years? Right. Consecutively held in Chicago, and correct. So you announced that it's going to move to Orlando in 2016, which frankly, was a bit of a shocker. What precipitated that move? Some of the reasons that caused you to announce that? Well,
you're right. 20 consecutive years in Chicago, but for some of those that have are long in the tooth and either bald or gray in the head, will know that there was a time where GRAPH EXPO actually did end up in other places and was hosted in other cities. We decided after 20 years that it was time to look at that, and there was probably three primary reasons for that. First and foremost was the fact that, and although it's very tactical, it's very important. This year over GRAPH EXPO, we will be over the absolute similar dates of Rosh Hashanah, the high Jewish holiday, and we feel terrible about that, and we don't like that at all. We were actually, after a couple of years of trying to work with Chicago and say, listen, we need alternate dates, they basically came back to us and said, listen, there's nothing we can do about it. If you want fall dates, those are the only ones that we have available.
Right.
Now, we were very disappointed in that. but we understand that that's the hand we were dealt. What was more surprising is in 16, they came back to us and basically told us we have the similar dates for 16. So we recognize, listen, 1 year is bad enough, but we cannot do that 2 years in a row. So that was a precipitating factor. And then you add a couple others into it. Number one, the cost. Even though our exhibitors and even attendees have seemed to have done a pretty good job over the years of managing the high cost of either exhibiting or attending an event in Chicago, it's really gotten to be challenging. Primarily, we saw something occur over the last couple of years where the hotel room rates, Mark, has started to increase. We have anywhere between 25 to 30 hotels that host our block during the show. Well, for this year, only 5 of those hotels are going to have room rates under $200.
Right.
That's just unacceptable. And that's not because the city doesn't want to work with us, but right now the city is a hot commodity, not only for shows like ours, but also other business events and things like that. So we realize between the high holidays, between the cost of actually attending that show, as much for attendees and exhibitors, and even the cost of the hall. Exhibitors have had to deal with a number of the union issues, and it's gotten better, but still far when you compare it to other things. So we look at the things relative to cost, the challenges that we've had with holidays that we've had to deal with, and also, quite frankly, of everything, it's time for a change. We think after 20 years, it's going to be good to put a new face, a new location to it, and that's how we ended up in Orlando for September 2016.
So your event that you held down in Orlando for exhibitors, I mean, you said that actually the hotel rates in Orlando are quite a bit cheaper than Chicago.
Exactly. We find ourselves actually flipped in the other direction. If we take our 25 to 30 hotels that we will have in Orlando, only 5 of them will be over $200.
Right.
So the reality of it is the cost for attendees and T&E will be much more affordable in Orlando. It's the second largest exhibit hall in the country, North America actually, more modern than many halls in the country, and including parts of McCormick Place certainly. And then we have the benefit of right to work rules, so exhibitors will be able to exhibit there with the work rules for move in and move out and rigging and drayage at discounts as much as 15 to 20% less than what they're doing in Chicago. So there was a lot of things that came into play relative to why Orlando was the place that we chose as being the best one.
Yeah. Now, do you think with those lower exhibitor rates that will help get exhibitors to bring more equipment to the show? Because
we hope so. We do. It's too early to tell at this point because so much of what they bring is also driven on the new technology that they have to provide to showcase. Cost is a big part of it, no doubt, but they want to show things that are new and relatively the latest technology. So it depends. I think you and I talked about this when we were together only a couple of days ago. I think the Drupal link being that year is going to help the fact that Orlando in 2016 will provide probably arguably maybe more equipment and the newest and latest technology, because so much of what's going to be shown at Drupa in May in the US, there's going to be a great opportunity to show it there in our country here.
Right, and as we know, not to beleaguer our friends at Drupa, but not that many Americans really make the trip to Germany.
Yeah, and your point is right. I mean, this is not, Drupa is a great, Messe Dusseldorf and Drupa is a great show, the granddaddy of our industry. But like other events in ours, fewer and fewer people are willing to get in a plane and travel. We even see that with our own show. That's one of the reasons why we think actually moving it to Orlando was good. Now we can move the show around to a different locale. We think we might get a new and a refreshed type of attendee that maybe wasn't willing to get on a plane to go to Chicago. Drupa has also experienced the same thing, and you're right, although a lot of Americans do, the number of Americans heading to Drupa every 4 years has clearly declined, and that's data that certainly the people from Messe Dusseldorf have shared. So I think it does make, to your point, it does make it valuable for U.S. customers to see GRAPH EXPO 16, regardless of where it is. Because
well, you know, one of the first thoughts that came to my mind when you announced the move to Orlando, though, is that, you know, when it's in Chicago, frankly, a lot of Midwestern printers, you know, drive to the show. You know, I guess the big wild card question is how many of these people are going to now get on planes and fly to Orlando?
Yeah, that is a good question, and that's not an easy answer we have. But I do know three things. Number one, I think the fact that we were in Chicago for 20 years actually put people in that Midwestern area almost a little complacent about the fact that, oh, I was last year, maybe maybe I can go. I don't have to go this year. The second thing is the cost to get to Orlando is very, very affordable, particularly from the Midwest. Orlando is a major, not just national, but international airport. Matter of fact, Brazil, it's the #1 gateway city for Brazil, and we'll come back to that too, because it's one of the reasons why we think Orlando is a good place. So very affordable hotel rooms, airfares, per diems, things like that. So we do think that, although we don't know the answer for that for sure until we get there, we do know that the feedback we've received is such that it is a good move. And I think, you know, certainly we're not going to get as many people that drove out of that Midwestern area, but we do think we'll get many of them, in addition to the fact that we may also pick up some people from the Southeast that weren't showing up in Chicago.
Now, Orlando was only one of the cities you considered.
Yes.
You know, as you announced there, you looked at Las Vegas, Anaheim, California, Indianapolis, and Philadelphia. And frankly, I was a little bit surprised, being based here in Philadelphia, that Philadelphia became the finalist between Orlando. What kind of, you know, rationale did you use in deciding ultimately on Orlando over those other cities?
Well, I'll tell you this, your mayor in Philadelphia was very interested in this piece of business, because
I bet he was.
Received a couple of calls from him, very interested. And we're sorry it did not end up in your backyard, Mark, but we found a lot of reasons that Orlando was the right one for our first effort to be outside of Chicago. You know, Anaheim, Las Vegas, Indianapolis, and Philadelphia all had very compelling reasons why they should be considered, many that are very obvious, okay? Some that are not so. When we talk about Orlando, the reason that was very important to us is it is an important gateway city to Latin America. As I mentioned before, Brazil, this being the #1 U.S. city for flights from Brazil, that's the biggest market in South America and Latin America for us, and many that have been involved in GRAPH EXPO over the last few years recognize that that's an important part of what we're trying to do, is not just be a U.S. or a North American show, but appeal to the Latin American. We have a Latin America Day that we do every year at the show, and we will continue to focus on that in many ways. We think the West Coast is important. That's why Vegas and Anaheim are on the short list too.
Right.
But when we looked at all the variations, and there were many, dates, costs, things, and availability during an important time frame in 2016, that's where Orlando was head and shoulders above what the others had to offer for 2016.
And, you know, for the lovers of the Windy City, we should also point out that Print 17 is back in Chicago. But after that, it's kind of a wide open game as to where the show is going to go in future years.
You're right. And actually, again, we think print and Chicago certainly work together very well. So we will be in Chicago for Print 17. As you mentioned, after that, Chicago is still a viable option.
Right.
But I think one of the things that precipitated our move to Orlando, and the feedback that we've gotten from both the exhibitors primarily, some attendees, but for those of you that are commercial printers and in-house package printers, we'd love to hear from you. I'm not hearing enough from attendees, Mark. So we'd love your readers and your watchers that are not exhibitors to share some observations with us about the move. But what we found so far is once we opened up that potential, we realized that, you know what, there are other markets out there, particularly when we look at the West Coast. When I say West Coast, Anaheim and Las Vegas cover the West markets. Philadelphia, Indianapolis, if we decide that Chicago needs an alternate location. So after 17, to your point, everything is up in the air. Everything is possible. We're going to assess. Chicago might be an every other year venue. You know,
Right.
that's one of the things we're talking to our partners in Chicago about, and also want to hear from both attendees and exhibitors alike what your thoughts are on that.
Right. Well, you know, Ralph, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. And thanks for watching PI Exchange. Be sure to visit piworld.com to stay up to date on the latest industry news, and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn so you can submit your questions for a next PI Exchange interview, and the next one will be held July 30th. Thanks again, and thanks for watching.